We can get started. Welcome, everybody, to the Tuesday, January 6th meeting of the City of Frederick Active Mobility Advisory Committee. David, I see you have introductions of new members on the agenda. Is this to just introduce everyone to everyone who wasn't here last month?
Essentially, yes.
Excellent, excellent. I'm glad that's there. So, do we want to just do a go around of everyone? Because a couple people are, I know Jen, you weren't here last month, and I don't think Jake, you were here last month. You were here. Okay. Well, Jen, do you want to start?
Sure. I'm Jen Whitmore. I'm cyclist and pedestrian on city resident.
Carmen Ambaruso, city resident, scooterist.
Jake Thurman, parent. Well, trying to think of other things to say besides city resident, which is required. I don't know. That's a biker. I have an e-scooter too.
Alyssa Boxhill, chair, city resident on the north side. Bicyclist, obnoxiously so.
Phil Prestia, city resident, ride a cargo bike and walk a lot.
Glenn Ferguson, East Side resident, pedestrian and cyclist.
Carolyn Cambariate, touring biker, hiker, city resident part of the time.
I, of course, am David Edmondson, staff.
Great for everyone to be here. I know Shelley isn't here this month, but
Yeah, she's sick. Yeah, she didn't want to give it to anybody else.
it's going around.
Yeah.
So next up, we have approval of the December minutes. Assuming everyone had a chance to read through them, did we have any comments or questions, concerns, changes before moving to approve? None said. Can we have a motion to approve the December minutes, please? Thank you, Carolyn. Can we have a second?
Second?
Thank you, Phil. Do you go by Phil or Philip? Phil. Okay, good. All in favor? December minutes are approved. Excellent. So next up, status of the Adopt-A-Bus stop.
Yes. Has anybody had a chance to go out and take a look, see what the status is?
No.
I suppose then the next question would be, would anybody be willing to check it out prior to next month's meeting? And just make sure that everything's all good, trash is picked up.
Okay.
Cool. Lovely. Thank you, Jen.
Thanks, Jen. Moving to staff review and the crash report.
Yes. There were 6 crashes from this last month. As requested, I've included the little guidance for what happened. Are there any questions on any of these crashes?
General question. When it says driver was not cited, what does cited mean?
Were they issued a traffic ticket of some kind?
Okay. Is that on the officer to say, or is that the person who is hit has I don't know if that's a different thing where if they wanted to charge or whatever. Is that different than citing?
To be cited is strictly up to the officer.
Okay.
I suppose you could always ask for civil damages,
Right.
As an individual. I should note that in the few instances where we've had a hit and run, they were cited, but there may be other legal consequences that are not in the crash report itself.
Okay. Thank you.
And one other thing to note, just for the knowledge of folks who are not necessarily familiar with the reports, these are reports that involve police or EMS being called. So if there is a crash and nobody gets called, then they will not show up in the report. And it's city only, obviously.
Yes. Okay, let's move on then. To project updates. As per our new schedule, this will only be the projects that are in the planning office, not the engineering office. I did check with them to see if there's anything that's pressing, and they said, nope, not right now. Let's move Frederick to start. We are on draft 9, and those final edits, hopefully final edits, are currently being made, and we will see what comes out of that, and hopefully that will be the final draft. East Street Rosewood Trails Phase 3 Bridge. We are working on getting all of the paperwork together to be able to get this in front of the council on January 15 to award. If we can't get it there, then it will be probably on February 5th, which would be the next opportunity.
Are there any outstanding concerns at this point about timelines relating to spending the funding that we have?
The same ones as before, which is need to start drawing down the construction funds by September 30th.
Okay.
And we haven't been able to get that extension passed just yet. Maryland DOT thinks they might have a way to enable us to spend down some of that legally ahead of time. So we're gonna. So once we can award this project, then we're going to make that happen.
Great.
7th Street protected bike lane. We have a proposal in that seems to be really solid. This was awarded, as you might know, in 2022, FY 2022. But we are moving towards 100% design on that. Once we have the, yes, we should be able to get that project started by March. Assuming that nothing goes wrong, of course. Rock Creek Trail widening, that walking tour has been pushed back till March from January 10, because that is in only a few days, and obviously I haven't heard. We are hoping to get some more work done by then, but we are excited to see that coming. We don't have any reasonable updates for any of the other projects that we have. On our shelf is still the East Street redesign. Yes.
Do you know what the date's gonna be for the walking tour for Rock Creek in March, or how far in advance you'll know?
I can, don't know just yet. It'll be mid-March.
Okay.
But we can finalize that. Actually, yes, we do need to finalize that as soon as possible. Yes. Are there any other questions around project updates?
David, I see that you included a pretty scaled up version of the maps for Rails with Trails. Was there any specific reason that that was all
Yes.
included? Okay. Good.
That will be for a little bit later in the agenda.
Gotcha.
All right, well, believe that's it for staff update in that case. Next item, I believe, is our working date.
Yes, before that is listed here as overview of active projects, but
Oh,
if that's
okay.
the same thing as project update, then we just did it.
Not quite.
Okay.
So one of the things that people wanted was an overview of what all we are doing. We're doing a lot, and I do mean a lot. We, as you might see a few pages on, we have 2 studies that are currently active, 5 projects that should be moving through FY27. We have 1 project that's currently on the shelf. We have another project that will probably finish by the end of by the end of June. 5 traffic calming projects that are underway, 6 projects that will start by the start of July, and 2 projects and 1 study that may start by then. So that's just sort of the surface of it. We are working towards, we have a number of very small projects. We build sidewalks oftentimes. We repair sidewalks. We have our whole capital improvement program. We are working really hard also to make sure that we both have a timeline to finish things, because as you may know, we have a tendency to have projects that have a very long lifespan, that feel like they just go on forever. East Street Rails with Trails is one of those, because that was started 12 years ago. But we are very intent on moving from a planning forever thing or state to an actually doing state. On the last pages of your packet, we have brief descriptions of all of the projects that we currently have. The 2 studies that are happening, the Vision Zero Action Plan, that one is looking at a number of different high injury corridors. These are areas where we see a lot of crashes, and they are what drive a lot of our numbers of serious injuries. You'll notice, for instance, that we had 2 crashes at the same intersection just this past month. We are going to be focusing in on those, but also there are a number of areas, like we had crashes all over the city. So we're also looking at, through this, ways that we can improve our safe system, which is through things like enforcement, through design, through programs and advertisement, and trying to make our overall transportation system safer. The prior modality, which was dominant in the US up until probably the early 2000s, was cost-benefit analysis, looking at the value of crashes and trying to minimize that, but also looking at the value that's created by, say, wider roads and so on, and balancing these things out. We as a city have taken a stance through the Vision Zero resolution that this is not an ethical way that we want to proceed, and so we are moving in a direction to see that we have no serious injuries and no deaths on our streets. Let's move. Frederick is the very long in the oven comprehensive bike ped plan. Its purpose is to present a vision for the future and to set aggressive goals to make sure that what we are doing is something that moves us in a direction that our city council and board of aldermen prior to that have laid out. Namely that we reduce our driving, that we promote non-driving means of transportation, and that we strive to make that normal and even expected. The headline right now, drafted, is still to have 25% of all trips, not just to work trips, but all trips be done by bike and 10% by walking over the next 25 years. It's a pretty aggressive goal, but based upon the research that we have, it seems to be something that's feasible. Our oldest project that's currently still active is East Street Rails with Trails. So East Street Rails with Trails is a 4-part project. And phase 1 is the Sharrows that you'll see from South Street heading north to about 7th Street on east. That was finished quite a while ago, and we are going to be redoing that, but that is under the aegis of the East Street redesign. Phase 2, that is a shared use path from 8th Street north to about 800 feet south of the Maryland 26 interchange. So you'll notice that there is some of that path that's built, also some of it that sort of goes into the woods and dead ends. This is because we try to make sure that that the developers that are working in the city, they are responsible to build the projects that are adjacent to their properties. Phase 3, that's the bridge, and that'll take it from the current north end of phase 2 all the way up to the northernmost edge of the Clemson Corner Shopping Center. After that is phase 4, and that we'll take it from there all the way up to and across Monocacy Boulevard. After that, we have the county segments, Walkersville, and to Walkersville, that's the F&P Trolley Trail. That is moving towards 100% design right now, and that'll even go across the river. And then there's some more of the county plan that's coming beyond that, and that'll take it all the way to Woodsboro. So eventually, you'll be able to ride entirely on something that is a dedicated and safe path from 8th Street north, and beyond that, from South Street north, all the way to Woodsboro. On top of that, you will notice on here these little dotted lines. These are other projects that are in the works. One of them is the Tuscarora Creek Trail and pieces of our shared use path network, which is sort of a bucket for all of our projects that deal with off-street paths. And a lot of these are in floodplain because you can't build anything else in a floodplain. Moving on. We have the Golden Mile Multimodal Access Project. So this one is a shared use path and bus only lane on the westbound or north side of US 40 from Bauman's Lane out to out towards Waverly, ends there. This overlaps with a number of other projects that are happening in that area, including traffic calming on Hillcrest and on Hillsdale and McCain, on Willowbrook, and also a general examination that we're starting to spin up that looks at the north-south crossings of that road because it is so tough. People have they actively avoid walking along there even though you can just because it feels so unsafe. It intersects with the interchange redesign, which goes from Norva to Bauman's Lane, and that is funded with federal funding, though we've been extracting it from MDOT SHA has been extremely difficult and time-consuming, and we still aren't there yet, but we're trying. Any questions so far, or shall I go on?
I have questions going back to the Let's Move Frederick plan.
Sure.
With, I think you said 25% by bike and 10% by walking.
Yes.
In however many years? I don't remember.
25.
But I guess my question is, do you have the data of where residents work? Like, because I would assume that most commutes are probably going and coming back from work. So I don't know, like, does that percentage line up with the amount of people that live in Frederick and also work in Frederick?
So it's interesting is that 75% of all trips, well, sometimes even more depending on where, are not to and from work.
Okay.
The vast majority of trips are within an easy biking range, and fair plurality are within an easy walking range, as long as it's actually safe and
Right.
is comfortable. When we look at where people work, it does tend to be that the way that it works in Frederick is sort of similar to how it works in a lot of places. We have a lot of people that come in from out of town to come work here, usually from places further out from the DC and Baltimore areas. And we go in to the inner suburbs, and they go into the cities. So we sort of have this weird like shift towards the centers of gravity and then back out. But especially with telework, a lot of the vehicle miles that we drive in the city are actually within the city. We're about, currently the borders are about, we're sort of an oval that's about 7 miles north-south and about 4 miles east-west. If you include the area south of 70, then it adds another mile or two. But that's still essentially the entire urbanized area within a fairly easy biking distance of our core. One of the other nice things about Frederick is that we are a very centralized city. Unlike some places, we don't have this sort of either polycentric where there's a lot of little cores, or sort of there is no core and sort of this like smeared landscape thing, which happens in a lot of places. We are very centralized, and we are essentially a mini anchor to our region. That makes it pretty easy to draw upon the mixed use development that we have in our core, and the bits that are developing in the growth areas that we have. The trickiest part will be that a lot of our non-work trips go out of the city and into the county, heading south. The county is working hard to improve their biking standards, but they don't have as aggressive of mode share goals as we do, which is sensible because they are a much larger jurisdiction and much more spread out. But it still does make it more difficult to, say, get to target from here.
That was actually going to be like my next question. It's like how much, and maybe I don't think it's part of this, but I'm also curious, just like how much is the city working with the county and even like the next county over to be able to be like, all right, well, we need more bus routes, or we need something else, other than roads, I guess, to get people around, kind of thing.
A lot is probably the base of it. We always ask the state for additional funding for our bus service. The county is about to flip from a rural county to more of an urban county for the purposes of funding, which significantly will increase our per capita funding from the state and federal governments. So that's going to be a real bonus, and will probably help. But the county transit just doesn't have the capacity to run bus service outside of our jurisdiction, and the state doesn't make it a priority to add bus service in sort of a coverage way that does the real like inter-county work like you might see elsewhere, where you could hop on a bus at any time and go into Cumberland or something like that. It's just not something that they want to do much of. We also always ask for additional funding for the Brunswick line, and we have been very active and banging our drums as loud as we can. We've been asking for better service since it opened. In fact, even in the first interviews on the day of opening, there were folks saying, we need to have this on weekends. And state said, oh, we didn't even think of that. And so we are pressing them as hard as we can.
Thank you.
I would like to ask, I think in other years I've heard talk that At other years, I think I've heard people talking about how we would plan to have a bicycle route down to the canal.
Mm-hmm.
And has that disappeared or some distant place?
It is something that the county is mostly working on right now, and they are actively pursuing funding for it. Also out to Middletown as well, and trying to tackle that monster of a hill.
David, is there a way that we could get, I know not everybody who's currently on this committee has seen the last draft of the Let's Move Frederick. Some of us have and are aware of the contents, and some haven't had that opportunity to see that.
Sure.
Is there a way we can get that distributed to our newer committee members so that they would be able to review that? I know it's still in
Absolutely.
draft, but whatever the draft
Yeah,
was
I
that we
believe
were-
draft 7 is currently what's online, and I'll send that around,
helpful.
Thank you.
of course.
I was wondering if maybe there'd be more receptive ear at the state level if instead of positioning this as just, oh, we want alternatives, if it was instead framed as, well, here's some of the things we want to do to get the number of cars off of 15 or 270, since that seems to be something that always comes up at their end. And
Yeah, we've, as we've gone through the process, especially during the last administration, one of the things that we discussed was we want to have the widening and opportunity lanes project because the state essentially hasn't given us options. This is the problem that we have today, is driving, and if we don't, or is this traffic flow, and we know that it won't solve traffic in the long run, but if all you're going to fund is roads, then we want to make sure that we don't get we don't get left behind on that. We would rather see a Brunswick line upgrade, but that is not something that seems to be coming. And on top of that, even if it were, that would still be, 10, 15 years out. and the Opportunity Lanes project, that was something that would be a lot sooner and would have funded additional transit options to Tyson's, as well as to Shady Grove. Any other questions?
If you can just refresh our memory, the McCain traffic calming was taken off the list, correct? That project was canceled in favor of the Hillcrest?
So, it was deferred. So we're not quite sure right now. So I don't want to speak too much for Shraddha because that's
Sure.
her project.
Right.
But when we last spoke on the subject, it was that the Hillsdale traffic calming was still going to happen, but we weren't quite sure what the form of that would take. Anything that we do on McCain has to complement that. And so we really want to nail down the Hillsdale first and then move to the other road.
Gotcha.
Other projects that we have happening. We have let's see here, North Branch Trail. So this is an engineering project that will be built in phases. We finished design and it's going to be built as we can. You'll notice, so that is this project right here on the map. Kind of comes up like so. You'll notice this weird jog in it. That's because this segment right here, and that's between Montague and Bauman's Lane, this is all really deep floodplain. And to go along it, we would actually have to build a pretty significant wall behind these properties, and then go up and then hit it there. On top of that, there is a bank that's south of Bauman's Lane that doesn't want us to cross their property, and so we have to go around that a little bit. And that means that the alignment doesn't quite line up. Anyway, this whole project is almost $5 million. What we are working on, among other things, is this segment of Shookstown Road. This is where we will direct people. And that's one of the other projects that's happening and should be finished up actually by the end of June. The other segments will be done, or those will be started next fiscal year.
I believe that there's an additional part that was built by a neighborhood in there in this section
Yes.
was completed that's not marked as red on there for what it's worth. I tried to bike the built fragments of it one day and cut through where I couldn't. But I mean, because you can almost do all of this now. You just then like have to cut over to the road after the Shookstown part, and you can do Shookstown, and there's just not infrastructure, you know.
Right.
But yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
there's lots of little annoying gaps and like no on ramps from the sidewalk, you know, lots of things like that where it's not.
Yeah.
It's clearly, yeah. This is kind of a general question. Because there is lots of developer built segments like that. Oftentimes, biking around Frederick in places I'm not as familiar, at least with the current state of it, I'll find that like I kind of just hit a dead end and I'm like, oh, let me explore this, and I just like, the East Street Rails with Trails fragment, for example, like. I've seen people come out of there like bewildered, like, I tried to go down there because, oh, there's this cool trail. And then it's just, yeah, you kind of just get dead end and it's not cleaned up back there and kind of sketchy. I don't know. It's kind of a general question of, is there something the city could do to improve the way that those segments, I'm sorry that I'm kind of thinking this on the fly, so I'm not phrasing it very well, but it almost feels like if there was a sign or something that's like, this is a future part of a trail or something, that would be helpful, because I don't know, sometimes those are confusing out in the wild.
Most of the way that we have addressed it has been to have it as a mental note that it's annoying that there's this little thing that isn't quite done yet, but it's partially done. And the Bauman's Lane, the bikeway there, the one that's also up by TJ High School. These are sort of stakes in the ground, and they're promises that things will happen in the future. But we haven't had an internal talk about signage or something similar.
Yeah, I guess that, and like, you know, I think we've talked before about there's lots of dead ends and sidewalks where this property got constructed and then the sidewalk dead ends and there's no way to get onto the road, or you just kind of have to, you just get stuck, you know. So anyway,
Yeah.
just a thought. Sorry, that's kind of off topic.
No, that's fine. Alyssa, I see you're thinking. Okay. Moving on. We have East Street redesign south that we mentioned. That is paused. Currently, that says it's paused for public outreach. That is not quite correct. Instead, it's paused due to staff resources. We're focusing on Jefferson Street redesign. We just spoke about the Shookstown Road. We have 5 traffic calming projects that are happening in various phases. We can leave that up to engineering to talk about next time. But essentially, our traffic calming program is intended as a way to, it's intended as a way to ensure that we still have the capacity for the road that is there, but that it functions in a safer way. If we find that people are speeding a lot or it's generally unsafe, we get a complaint about something, then we'll take a look and see what we can do. Oftentimes that ends up being that there's too much road between the curbs. So we may have reserved some space for parking and no one parks there or something. And so folks speed. Shraddha Prahaj, she's one of our traffic engineers. She leads this project and program and does a really good job at figuring out what's the best use for this excess space, and how can we address the concerns people have in a way that makes the most sense for the road as it is. Oftentimes folks want speed humps, but the way that speed humps work, they don't work for most of the roads in the city. And so instead we look at that desire for speed humps as like, okay, so you want it to be slower. Let's figure out how we can do that. For East Street Roads with Trails Phase 3, we have talked about that. 7th Street, we've talked about that. The Golden Mile redesign, we've talked about that too. The North Market Bikeway, we haven't talked about that. That is currently an engineering run project, but essentially it is, let's see what we can do to make safe cycling from 7th Street up to the Warman's Mill Road area. What are the ways that this can actually be something that is a link between our downtown and those northern neighborhoods? We do have funding for it. We have been awarded. We just haven't signed the paperwork with the state yet. we've talked about the Rock Creek Trail widening feasibility study. The Monocacy Village Park Trails. I did actually just tonight, I calculated that 100% design should be done if everything goes according to plan in 2028. But that would fix these dead-end trails over on the east side of East Street and extend them. They've been dead ends since the 70s when they were built. 2 projects in 1 study might start this year, depending on how things go with funding as well as other projects. One of them is the Thomas Johnson Clemson Corner Crossing Study. That is figuring out a way to cross 15 somewhere between Hillcrest and the interchange. Hillcrest is the northernmost that it would go. We do have, so there was originally a plan to extend the road over and connect Warman's Mill to Hillcrest here in this area. And so we have the earthworks there. So this is actually fairly straightforward, but it's still pretty far away from the primary goal, which is linking this neighborhood and Amber Meadows and this neighborhood. Whether that's an overcrossing, undercrossing, we don't know at the moment. It really depends on where we can have a reasonable crossing. And there are no public lands or easement between Hillcrest.
I believe
and
it's
26.
Hayward.
Oh, sorry, Hayward. Thank you. I'm sorry. That's what I was thinking the whole time. Thank you. Hayward. All right. Yeah. Yeah. So that's one of the studies that's funded, and we're hoping to get that started relatively soon. Waterford Park reactive lighting pilots. That is, of course, Waterford Park. We are fully funded to look at to redo the lighting in that park with something that is downward directed, that is reactive to the presence of people, that doesn't stay on all night, saving energy, and also saving wildlife, helping that, and also making sure that we no longer have lights that are shining in folks' windows, which has been a complaint that people have had, I think, for as long as I've been here, and as long as those lights have been up. Yes, that is the project so that's a project that's nice because it's a one jump. We can go from, we are fully funded to go from idea to actually having it finished. But we don't have any of the paperwork signed yet with the state, so working on that.
And just so I'm clear, I think this was something that was brought up a number of meetings ago. The shared use paths themselves are accessible at any time of night, even if the parks themselves are closed at 10 p.m.
Correct.
Okay.
And the lights would react to the presence of someone, both so that way you know if there's someone in the park, because the lights are on, so you don't have the lurking issue. But also, that way this is a piece of our transportation network. Even if you have to come home late at night because you were out with friends or else working a night shift, or if you're heading to school in the morning, the idea is that this is always going to be there for you. And it's always going to be some somewhere that's safe and accessible, like any other road.
Is it a pilot also in the sense that we would consider doing this elsewhere throughout the city
Yes.
if it's successful?
So this is the first smart cities thing that we would do. Smart cities is the idea of integrating sensors and technology and other things that require back-end tech to function properly. This is a very tricky place to work because there's the chance that your software no longer works. There's a chance that your vendor goes out of business and then you can't upgrade your stuff. You can't keep your stuff going. There's also a lot of training that goes into it because suddenly instead of just swapping out a light bulb, you might have to swap out a sensor and reconfigure it, which could be a whole other tech support process. But if this works for us and our staff generally, then this is something that we could use elsewhere. One of the things that we get a lot of questions about is if we build a path in this location, is this going to wreck my night? Is this going to mean that I'm always going to have a light that's shining inside my window? Does this mean that we're always going to have light on the creek, which is not great for the wildlife? We want to make sure that we take those concerns seriously and that these are unalloyed goods to the best extent that we can, and not cause new problems and say it's just something that happens in the sake of progress. So this is the rundown of all of the projects that I am currently keeping track of. Oh, there was one study. I forgot to mention one study, which is the Streets Master Plan. We don't have a scope yet for this, but this would come after Let's Move Frederick is finalized and passed. Once we have that, a Streets Master Plan essentially looks at our street network. Does it do what it's supposed to do? And we can scale it large and we can scale it small. Scaling it large means that we look at all of our streets and see, does it make sense to have the arterial road here? Do these one-way pairs make sense? So, in downtown, does it make sense for South Street to be one-way, et cetera? And then how does that impact the whole network? And beyond, if we're going to be annexing certain parcels, what should our street network look like out there? What are the alleyways or the local streets or the major roads? How do we integrate the existing street network? That's looking at it in a very granular and like the biggest thing that we could do. But you can scale it back and look at only the major roads. You could say that these are going to be our major roads in the broader annexation area where we may grow. We're not sure yet what this would look like, but the fundamental need that it would address is we tend to build upon what we last did. That makes sense a lot of times, but that means that if there's a problem that we're not looking for, then we may not see it, and we're just replicating the problem along. On top of that, as we build outwards, we may end up with situations where a major road that's currently a rural road, where houses open out onto it and so on, that may end up being a fast major highway feeling street and ruin the character of the place for the people that currently call it home. Is that going to be okay? Don't know. But how do we deal with that, and how do we plan for the future so that way we know what we're going to be seeing rather than by development.
David, thank you for compiling this and going through it with us. Any other questions before we move to our meeting planning, our working date planning? Hearing none. So this is for selecting a date for our working session, which, as we
Yes.
already determined, would be outside the scope of one of our monthly meetings.
Yes. We could discuss it as a group. I could also send out a doodle poll. Given that it's January and originally the plan was to have this in January, I think that February makes more sense. Would we like to talk about it as a group right now, or just stick this back inside of a doodle poll for scheduling reasons?
I think just out of curiosity, I would want to know from the group, are we thinking during the week, evenings, weekends, that sort of thing? I mean, the assumption being that we all have, or most of us have day jobs, and so 9 to 5 is pretty much off the table. So just kind of establishing that before you throw a bunch of different darts at the wall for a doodle poll and not really
Right.
have it kind of more focused. Any thoughts? The only day that I can't do in terms of evenings is Thursdays generally. So for me, that would pretty much be off the table.
My schedule varies. There's certain Mondays, there's certain Wednesdays, there's certain Saturdays, there's days I'm traveling. But in general, evenings are better, especially during the weekday. On the weekends, honestly, mornings are better for me. There's several Saturdays where we have gigs and I'm not available, but
Okay. I guess with those, go ahead, Phil. With those guidelines in mind, maybe send out a doodle poll and see what we get.
So evening during the week?
With
Not
the
Thursday.
exclusion of Thursdays?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Does the 6:30 time generally work?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll go for some time on a weeknight that is not Thursday, and the time would be 6:30 at on whatever day that would be. Probably the easiest thing then, since that's an entire month, is if you could send me the dates that do not work. Then I can figure out dates that do work. And I will email Shelley as well. Actually, I believe she's going to be on the YouTube. So Shelley, if you could email me as well. Thank you. And if you could get that by the end of the week, then I can send out a couple of options.
Can do. Moving on to committee announcements or comments. Anybody? Glenn?
I have a question.
Yes.
Kind of relating to the crash reports and some of the other sidewalk information. The city's parking committee would be provided with a report on basically trips and falls on the sidewalks. And they were, of course, the ones that were only reported, which kind of means somebody got hurt or some manner of EMS response was involved. And I was wondering if that was data that might be relevant to what we do here? If that's
I think
something we ought to look at?
I think it could be from a sidewalk improvement perspective. I think most of our sidewalk concentration is about connectivity and not necessarily maintenance. But I don't see why it wouldn't be something that we could at least be aware of.
Sure, I can ask to have those sent over as well.
Great.
Yes.
And I would like to contribute that on December 2nd, Jennifer White at 1A on NPR had a wonderful discussion of, with invited guests from the DMV discussing traffic accidents and how to respond. And one of the towns, I think it's in New Jersey, actually has an active committee that when they get a certain number of complaints at a certain area, they go out with their tape and their signs and their red cones, and they try to erect a temporary approach to fixing it. Then they evaluate that for 6 weeks or an amount of time. If it's successful, then they go on to make it more permanent. Like it's a quick response. And I like the idea because I think then that people who complained would see something happen right away. And they would have the feeling that, boy, our city board and our council really responds fast when we complain. They're great, something like that. So it was December 2nd. You can go on npr.org or .gov or whatever, and you can pay $3.99 and listen to it. I think it is. I already heard it, so I didn't pay to hear it again. But I thought it covered a lot of important points. For example, now traffic is much heavier than it actually was before COVID. It's now increased beyond that. It didn't go back to what it was. It became more.
Wow.
So I'll put my 2 cents in here.
Thank you. Anybody else? Do we have any public comment? You feel free to come up to the microphone, introduce yourself, and let us know what you have to say.
If you could hit the button as well.
Um,
Thank you.
Thank you very much for opportunity to be here tonight and share something with you. I came because I wanted to talk about a subject that I understand from Dave. The committee took up almost a year ago, back in February, and that's speeding, e-bikes, and e-scooters. So I guess I should introduce myself. I'm Kathy Kinsey, and I'm a member of the board of Friends of Baker Park. And we did a survey of our membership. We have about 300 members now. And we recently did a survey of our membership. And we just asked them for general input on issues that were important to them about the park, where they thought we should be focusing our efforts, ways we could improve the services that we provide. And we work with the city, Parks and Recreation, on enhancing the park and improving maintenance and on some pretty big projects like the plaza rebuild, which we helped to fund. What we heard back from the survey was this was unsolicited, but we got a lot of complaints about speeding e-bikes and scooters on the shared path in the park. And so, I spend a lot of time in the park, jogging through the park and walking through the park, and I've experienced it on a number of different occasions. In fact, I almost got run over by a bike at one point. And I am all for e-mobility. I am all for, micro-mobility. We want to encourage people to get out of their cars and get on their bikes and walk. Absolutely, that's totally, that's a really important goal and initiative. But I do think that we should be thinking about policies here before things, before we get more e-bikes and more e-scooters and we have a serious accident in which people get hurt. So, what's happening is these bikes are really going fast, and there's you all probably know there's basically 3 classes of bikes. Some of them have a throttle and, they can go up to almost 30 miles an hour, and others of them are sort of limited to the 20 mile an hour range. And, they're coming up on people, and there's no bells, there's no warning, and they're just flying by. And it's really upsetting, I think, to pedestrians who are walking their dogs or just walking through the park. And so I wanted to suggest or have a discussion with you all about the need for the development of some policies and or regulations to, govern where these bikes can ride, how fast they can go. I mean, this is a problem everywhere. It's not, and I don't think it's just a problem in the park. I saw an e-bike on a pretty narrow sidewalk on South Market Street about 6 weeks ago, going very fast right up the sidewalk. So I think could be a citywide problem, and it makes sense for us to get out ahead of it and to address these safety issues before, there is a bad accident or someone really gets hurt. And so I'm just wondering if you all have given any thought to working on the development of some regulatory approaches. I kind of looked, I did a survey myself, and I know Dave has looked into it as well. And I mean, there's no easy, great solution to these problems. We all know that, but I don't think that's a reason not to try to address it. And, there's education and outreach, and, some jurisdictions are imposing speed limits. Some have this geotechnical, it's a very highly technical approach, geotechnical fencing, and signage. I mean, there's a lot of different things that could be considered, to at least educate people about the issues and maybe control some of this. So that's it.
Thank you. I know based on our previous discussion, and we did have a member of the police department come to speak with us, there has been talk about speed limits and enforcement, and really the question, from what I recall our discussion being, is the issue that enforcement is a challenge. So personnel, staffing, the cost of technology to try to monitor that is exorbitant. So putting up signs that state that there is a speed limit with no way to enforce it is not productive from based on what came out of our discussions. But it's certainly something that we have talked about and have shared similar opinions. Excuse me, similar concerns.
Yeah, I'm not sure I agree that it's not productive, because I do think that outreach, education, signage can help. People may stop and think when they see the sign. It's entirely possible that pedestrians will, say something to people who are speeding along the sidewalk if there's a sign and there's a speed limit and everybody understands what it is. So I understand enforcement is an issue. That's going to be a problem, but I do think that you can still have impact with with outreach, education, signage, and maybe some speed limits. Or, some jurisdictions, like in New York, for example, they've banned all e-bikes on particular shared use paths. Now, I don't know that that's a reasonable option for, like, the Baker Park area, but it's something to consider, especially for the Class 3 bikes.
I think, just to add on to that, I think there's another problem in that manufacturers are also selling e-bikes when they're actually like e-motos, right? Where they're past Class 3, they go faster than 28 miles per hour. They usually have a throttle. And I do see a lot of people around here on those. But I do agree that it's probably very hard to enforce, especially on paths rather than on the street. So I am wondering what kind of designs are there around shared use paths that have been used, or if there are any that have been used to slow people down, because I would see that more of like a design problem, I guess, rather than maybe an enforcement or education, or with both of those in there. But yeah.
Yes, but I'm a little confused about, there's going to be state laws, there's going to be county laws, there's going to be Baker Park laws and Frederick City laws. I guess I'm confused about how you would sort all this out and what it would be possible to do in a group like that.
So that would be one goal of, sort of tackling this problem, is looking at what laws are in place. I doubt that there's too much in place at the state level. I think it's pretty much like zoning. It's going to be left up to, at least on local roads. Maybe for state roads, that would be different. But for parks and shared use paths, I would think that that's largely within the control of local governments. But that's part of the process of figuring out what makes sense, is looking at, what laws are on the books, and, you know, how would they interact with each other?
It also occurs to me as a biker that there are certainly mechanisms to slow down a bike that wouldn't interfere with a person walking. You know, if you're on a bike, you can't make a real sharp turn. You might have places where there would be a couple of steps to interrupt your ability to go smoothly and fast down the street. So there has to be mechanisms that would slow bikers, and especially those with electric bikes, versus people who are just walking.
I think there needs to be caution in limiting mobility modality. You know, as a committee, we are encouraging all methods of modality at the micro mode that are safe, so that we can all share these paths safely. So I would be cautious with introducing things like steps and sharp turns. You know, that could cause problems for wheelchair users or other folks who need to use other modality than a traditional bicycle or their own 2 feet or things like that. So, you know, that's something to keep in mind. But I am thinking that, you know, we've had this discussion actually a couple of times in my time on this committee, and I know previously when we had, you know, Kelly on our committee, and then we did have the police here a couple times. I may be misspeaking, so if I'm incorrect, I apologize. But I believe in most trails there is a 15-mile-an-hour speed limit. We have some trails that do have signage to that effect. But again, what came out of those previous discussions was that it wasn't being actively enforced. There wasn't necessarily resources to actively enforce it. But I don't know that that's the job of our committee to be able to ordain how it would be enforced. So I think that's a larger discussion to have with other folks as well. That being said, also on a lot of trails, there are limitations to the types of e-bikes that are permitted to use those, in terms of no throttle only bikes, must be pedal assist, that sort of thing. And then of course with e-scooters and other folks who, you know, aren't using additional manual, you know, propulsion, that they do not exceed the 15-mile-an-hour speed limit. So I do think a lot of times when we've had this discussion, it has come back to enforcement. So not that I don't 100% agree with you, because I use those trails and I specifically walk in Baker Park. I ride in Baker Park. I pull my poodle in a little cart behind me and my bike on Baker Park, and I do not love getting buzzed by somebody on a throttle-only bike going 30 miles an hour, and I've had it happen. So I share your concern there. I just think it might be a discussion that, you know, our group can have, and we can make recommendations, but oftentimes those things come down to we aren't actually creating regulation or enforcement orders, so that we have to have those discussions with other groups in the city.
Absolutely. I mean, this is something that has to involve planning, both the police department, so it is a multi-agency issue, really. And I agree. I mean, the enforcement is the issue, that is one of the subjects that, you know, we have to tackle. I will say that I don't recall ever seeing a speed limit sign in Baker Park, or any signs that restrict different, you know, throttle bikes, or, you know, any particular kind of bicycle or scooter.
I can't recall if Baker Park is one of those trails. I'm thinking it isn't. I know we've talked about some of the trails that have signage, and oftentimes, honestly, that signage might be very old, and it might be non-existent if it has deteriorated. So I don't even know that all the trails that maybe do have rules around them are marked as such, you know.
I'm just thinking that, you know, as more and more people start riding e-bikes, and they're becoming increasingly popular, especially as the population ages, you know, they're great for increased mobility for aging people, no question about it, and we definitely want to encourage all of that. Just makes sense to me that we would try to tackle this problem and issue before we get too far down the road. And it's a question of somebody looking at the issues and making some recommendations, and, you know, moving it forward through a multi-agency process, and ultimately, I guess, to the city council, right?
Well, I think with all these new projects that are in the works here, if you're going to have a multi-use path, that you need to apply the same design strategy to that as you would designing a road where you want to control the speed on that so that there's not speeding. So you want that to come into play. But yeah, definitely as far as the signage goes, the signs in the Market and Patrick Street banning bikes and scooters and rollerblades and whatnot from the sidewalk are very sparse.
Yeah, right.
So,
Yep. Yep. Thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity to bring the issue to your attention again. And I honestly hope that at some point in the not-too-distant future, you all do decide to take this up and maybe move something forward through a process, a public process. Thanks.
Thanks again.
Eric Jones, city resident. I guess I live like midtown. I'm kind of in the Hood 15, area. So up till about a year ago, I was a NAC 6 coordinator, and we met with NAC 9, and Peter Bream and I worked together quite a bit. And I can echo we talked about this a lot. It's not going to really go away. I don't expect it, and we can't ignore it. I mean, and in my own personal opinion on this, there's only so many east-west pathways through the city. We all know this, and really the only one that's pedestrian-friendly in any way is through Baker Park, the only one. So until there's other options, that's where all the traffic's going to go. I don't think, people that are walking, they're going to do that for enjoyment. I think much of the e-bike riding is functional mobility. And if there's a better way to get to where they needed to go, maybe it's on, the 7th Street Bikeway as that comes together, or Rosemont, if that becomes a new project. Wherever they need to go, if there's a better way to do it, they'll go that path, and it will alleviate. And then maybe that'll be the time that, they can say, all right, we have other options. Now we can restrict, the e-bikes off this path, because now it's just a nature walk. When I see the plans on here, I see it's a lot of connecting existing trails, and that makes sense. It's a lot of nice trails, paths, makes sense. I think that several, we talked about and I'm lucky enough I live and work in Frederick. I recognize that's a rarity, and it wasn't always the case. But yet many of the primary employers or areas of employment are not going to be anywhere near these paths. Fort Detrick's one. 7th Street might show up there. That gate is only open limited hours. The other one over on Farm Hill, kind of limited hours. It's not quite. Nailing Gate on Possum Town, that's 24 hours. And Possum Town in general, that's a big walking corridor, and so it's not on here. After Fort Detrick, the hospital, you're close to the hospital. Hospital's here, but then the hospital facilities that they're planning, where the State Farm is in the new area, I think that's just going to further develop and build. And then anyone that's ever gone to doctor's appointments on Thomas Johnson Drive. So I would advocate looking in some of these sections if you want to improve that home to work if you happen to live in the city. Commute. Thanks.
Thank you.
Speaking as a member of the public, perhaps, I do want to say that if you all will be in DC on the 10th for Transportation Camp this coming Saturday, please look me up. I will be there. Also, the following week is the Transportation Research Board, which is when 12 to 15,000 of the biggest nerds in the world on transportation will be coming into town. So there will be receptions and events. So again, look me up because I will be there too. If there are if there's anything in the agenda that you would like to that you would like me to take a look at, let me know. Also, all of the committee meetings, those are open and free to the public. And so if you've always been interested in rural roads or perhaps asphalt and how that functions, there are many opportunities to be involved and to link up with people who are really at the forefront of the field.
Thank you.
A little bit more information maybe, and times and places and all that.
Sure thing.
And would you remind me where our bus stop is again, because I can't remember it, I write it down, but then I throw away the paper.
It's Bauman's Lane. It's the one that's closest to the trail. On the shared use path side. Or
It's
not
just
shared use
north
path.
of Shookstown.
Yeah.
On Bauman's, yeah.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.